China approves a decision to improve Hong Kong's electoral system to ensure patriots administer the city. How will this impact Hong Kong's one country, two systems principle and its status as a financial hub? And the just concluded two sessions said China will pursue, quote, people-centered high-quality development to safeguard human rights in China. Is this just a lofty goal or China's own way of improving living standards and rights of its citizens? Welcome to The Point, coming to you from Beijing. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. On March 11th, the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, adopted a decision on improving the electoral system of Hong Kong's special administrative region. The decision follows the National Security Law of Hong Kong, which was passed last year. What are the specific changes? What influences will it have over Hong Kong? Joining me today from Beijing is Sheng, chief editor of the Global Times, and here in the studio, Einar Tangen, former U.S. prosecutor. Let me go to you first, Sheng. Good to have you with us. Welcome to The Point. Some Western commentators, international media, call this, new rule, this new decision by Beijing, as the end of Hong Kong's democracy. Do you look at that way too?
No, I don't think so.
Tell us why.
First of all, the reform of the election system in Hong Kong is like to set a very clear bottom line for everyone. Like, if you want to be a politician, or if you want to be elected representatives of the people, you need to be loyal to the country, to the people in Hong Kong, to the constitution, to the basic law. Then you can get the right people. You can get the correct people to represent the people in Hong Kong.
Well, but some critics argue that this new changes give the election commission overriding power, excessive power, as they say, over Hong Kong's politics. If you think about it, it not only elect the chief executive, but also going forward, the election commission of Hong Kong will elect, will nominate legislators and elect part of the legislative body. What do you make of that?
Just as I said before, is to make sure the people can elect the correct and reliable politicians or their representatives in the city. And without such reform, we can see what happened in 2019 during the political turmoil in the city. We can see many representatives of the elected representatives in the city, or lawmakers in the city, in the opposition camp. They have violated their, their promise and their which is written in the basic law. You need to be loyal to the People's Republic of China, and then they become the proxies, which is sponsored by the hostile external forces, to ruin the public order in the city and to damage the national security of the country in the city. So this is just like to correct the mistake.
Okay, Einar, how do you look at this? Is this, as some media call it, a change that will upend Hong Kong's democracy?
Well, let's put this in perspective. When the British were ruling over Hong Kong, there was no democracy whatsoever. They only changed the system on the point where they were going to hand it, or forced to hand it back to China. If they had stayed, the system that they had, which was entirely undemocratic, would have continued. So at this point, what you have is the Chinese government, mainland government, is not going to allow a part of its country to be, in essence, ruled by successionists. The United States had exactly the same problem after the Civil War. In fact, right now, you have a Democratic congressman who is suing the president and a host of other Republican party members who he believes encouraged the insurrection based on this idea that it is illegal to have any government official actually proposing succession or an illegal independence.
We remember what happened in Catalonia in Spain, right? I was a Washington correspondent back then, we remember well, Carlos Puigdemont, the pro-independence leader of Catalonia, an independent region, an autonomous region in Spain, declaring independence. The Spanish Prime Minister went all out, cracking down on the protesters, and arrested Carlos Puigdemont the first instance.
Yeah, well, I mean, every country, unless you're Scotland and there is a clear legal path to making a choice, the issue is that you cannot just simply keep subdividing countries. We would end up with nothing, basically a bunch of city-states akin to Athens many years ago in Greece. So at this point, when you swear that you're going to protect the country, that means the entire country, not just those parts that you think you have sway over. So at this point, China's doing what is necessary. Remember, Hong Kong is a strange place. There's 7 million people. 2 million of them are really basically foreigners, and they live very, very well. 5 million of them do not. They live at the bottom rungs of society. They're the ones who can't afford to buy a new home. They're the ones who are working in the restaurants and tourism and shops. And those are the ones who are suffering right now because just before COVID-19, you had all these riots which were pushing away any kind of tourism. And then you had COVID-19. They desperately need relief. They need a plan for the future. And that means not having the situation where you don't know from one day to the next whether or not there's going to be a mass protest and people being hurt or killed on the streets.
Yeah. Sheng, let's talk about the specifics of this legislative change that is coming as an appendix number 1 and appendix number 2 to the Basic Law of Hong Kong, which is also called the Mini Constitution of Hong Kong. The changes include expanding the election committee members from 1,200 to 1,500. They're not getting less, but more, actually. And then more sectors of society will be included. The significance of this change, in your opinion?
Of course, this will make the Hong Kong democracy much more efficient and much more reliable. You can see every time you increase more people into the election committee, we will make more people get represent. And now we have the reform, then we can make sure the people are reliable. This is very important. If you have unreliable people in the committee, or the extremist, or the separatist in the committee, this will be really dangerous for the Hong Kong democracy. So of course this is a good news for everyone who loves Hong Kong.
And then what is really, in your opinion, the democratic future of Hong Kong? I mean, it still has a judiciary system, a legislature, the office of the chief executive that is running a style that is pretty much different from that of the Chinese mainland.
I think you are actually asking a question about the one country, two systems. And if you look at these two things, one country and two systems, if you see them as they're contradicted to each other, then you will get a totally different conclusion. But in fact, one country and two systems, are dialectically unified. So without the one country, we can see what happened in 2019. Or when the one country get weakenized, you can see what happened in 2019 and some other political turmoils before that. Now the reform plus the national security law, we can finally have a very ideal condition for the city and for the officials, for the politicians, for the people in the city to seek the solution for the many other, the real problems that makes the city, makes the people worried, such as the housing problem, such as the education, media. In the past, you can see in the legislative council, you can see filibuster every month. When you're trying to solve the real problems, some politicians in the opposition camp, they just block or against everything proposed by the pro-establishment camp or the governments. So I think it's, just what I said, it's a good news.
So Einar, step back a little bit and really let's talk about this obsession with democracy. Many describe the protesters in Hong Kong as pro-democracy protesters, and then they're calling this legislative change by Beijing as a violation of democracy in Hong Kong. I mean, their underlining message is democracy is a great thing, is a panacea to many, if not most, of Hong Kong's problems.
Well, if Hong Kong had been democratic, totally electing their own officials, one day after the protests, it would not have changed the fact that Hong Kong, the majority of Hong Kong, is controlled by a very tight group of elite families who have been holding the land basically for for their own economic goods. In essence, they have allowed the people to suffer while they have prospered. That would not have changed. Nothing would have changed, except Hong Kong would have lost its ability to deal with the mainland. And in that case, where would they be? I mean, Hong Kong, its whole prosperity, to the extent it has enjoyed it, has been linked to the mainland. You can see quite clearly how they have prospered. Unfortunately, it was very, very uneven. So stepping back, democracy is not the issue. The issue is, what are you doing for the people? And unfortunately, all the people that my colleague was mentioning, they were trying to basically, make Hong Kong independent without a plan, not unlike what was happening in Spain.
Yeah. Many scholars argue that the ability of governance is actually more important than the form of government these days. Sheng, your last thoughts and reflections on these legislative changes and really Hong Kong's future and this link with the Chinese mainland?
My last thought about reform, is that what you're asking? Okay. For the people in Hong Kong, I believe those people who love Hong Kong, who believe they're Chinese, who love the country, they don't need to be afraid anymore. In the past, I was in Hong Kong in 2019 during the political turmoil. I have seen a lot of horrible things, including my colleague Mr. Fu Guohao. He get attacked at the airport of the Hong Kong International Airport, and the people like him, and also other the mainland immigrants in the city, and also many Hong Kong people who really patriotic, who disagree with those separatists or the opposition camp politicians or the Western, so-called universal values. They don't need to be afraid anymore. They can now elect the people that they trust, or they will be encouraged to contribute their thoughts, their talents to the governance of the city, to solve the problem for the people. So I'm truly glad to see such thing happen in 2 years after the turmoil. At that time, I was my colleagues and me and many people around me was waiting for this moment.
Really, we're hoping and praying for the best of Hong Kong. Thank you so much, Sheng, and thank you as always, Einar, for joining us.